let's get into the meat of the egg donor contract. Okay, I'm going to just rattle off the salient points, and maybe you can, after I tell you all, name all of these, you can give me just a summary of, what these mean and why they're important. Okay.
All right.
So
Let's do it.
there's parental rights and responsibilities, medical and psychological screening, intent of parties, medical facility physicians involved, compensation and payout arrangements, insurance and complications coverage, scheduling and travel, term and change of circumstances, disposition of embryos, future contact, privacy and confidentiality, and breach. Now, there's a lot. I'm going to list these all in the description, but this is basically the meat of the contract and all its major points. So why don't you explain what the meaning of these and why these are important to put in the egg donor contract?
Okay. These are the basic provisions that are part of a contract, and many of them are simply expressions of what's settled and understood by both parties in sort of a written format, in a written format. And there are other things that are a little bit more variable. For instance, the name of the IVF clinic, the compensation, those terms are fixed at the beginning, and we are basically installing them in the contract so that everybody has a clear understanding of what they're doing and what they're signing on to, not that it's something to be negotiated. Other provisions like disposition of embryos are provisions which are subject to particular thoughts and opinions and variations in what people want to do.
Okay, can you explain what disposition of embryos means?
Disposition of embryos means if there are embryos remaining from the donation, and there almost always are, they are the property of the intended parents. That's a sort of a cardinal rule to all egg donation. Once the embryo is formed, it is the property, it is the personal property, you might say, of the intended parents, and they have options.
Once the eggs are retrieved, they're the property of the parents, correct?
Yes, once the fresh eggs are retrieved, not if they're frozen. That's the distinction that's made. Once fresh eggs are retrieved, each egg belongs to them to then be fertilized, or an attempt for fertilization has to occur with the eggs. They can't be frozen in a fresh donation situation, which is almost always what we're involved with. So the intended parents have control over that. However, if there are embryos left over after they have finished and they're frozen, a lot of donors want some say in what happens to their genetic material years later, and not simply be unaware or unable to prevent or know about whether their own genetic material is being transferred to another clinic, to another family, for other purposes. Donors donate in a fresh donation cycle, which is what we are talking about, to a specific recipient or recipients. They may not know their names, but they know something about them, the clinic they're working at. They know that there is one family involved. They're not donating so that several families can have a crack at working with their embryos. So most donors are very concerned about limiting the distribution of their genetic material, and that's a natural concern. So those sorts of things are written in the contract, and there's some standard language that can reflect people's wishes, and that can be sort of modified and changed and adjusted based upon what everybody wants. We always come to some understanding, but the truth of the matter is, the donor's wishes sometimes control more than the intended parent's wishes. Because if the donor doesn't like what's going on or doesn't like what's being asked of her, she can walk away. And intended parents don't want her to walk away. Donors don't want to walk away. They're motivated, they're committed, they want to get paid, but they're not going to do it under any and all circumstances. So it's important not to try to extract as much as possible from your donor as far as permission rights down the line. Just, she's donating her eggs so that you can have a baby. Pretty much leave it at that.
And sometimes you can put in the contract, if the donor, let's say the donor wants to be informed of the outcome, she can request that that goes with the contract, correct?
Yes, many donors want that. And some intended parents are not comfortable with that. So that's sometimes where there are issues when it comes to reaching resolution. We have to have some sort of compromise. Many intended parents don't want a donor to know exactly the date of birth of the baby, exactly the sex of the baby, anything that could identify too much the baby that they have. They want to maintain some sort of privacy and not worry about who may be showing up in the future. It's a fear, but people have that fear. Donors many times don't care at all, and other times they want a lot of information. So we often have to compromise and not give the donor everything she's asking for, but give her enough to make her satisfied and comfortable.
And most donors, I feel, don't care, but the ones who do just want to know whether pregnancy resulted and they don't want to know date of birth or the sex of the child or anything like that. They just want to feel good about their donation and knowing that it was successful, just like a little morale booster.
Yeah, if you're a person, it's a natural feeling to want to know if you have kids in the world or not, and without knowing more specifics. So yeah, that's a common.
The egg donors don't think of the donation as their own kids. They just put in a lot of time and effort into helping a family, and I think they get a lot of satisfaction if they know it's successful and they're able to help that family. That's what I think. But in dealing with donors, that's the sense I get.
I'm not sure. There are some recipients who feel so grateful to their donors, value their donors, and let us know that, and even give us notes to pass along to the donors. And it's a very heartwarming feeling. And obviously it's easy to feel good about people that are doing that. But then there are other recipients, and we also try to understand where they're coming from, where they don't want to know from us. They don't want to know from this. This is just something they had to do because of fertility issues. And this is an unwelcome and unpleasant reminder of what they went through. So therefore, there is no contact with us or certainly with the donor in any form afterwards, and they wish for it to be that way. There's a spectrum of feelings. And in the contract, we can accommodate many different feelings and wishes. It is rare that there's such an opposition that we can't come to some sort of compromise or agreement in the contract.
And other things, compensation is fixed, but we also memorialize in the contract, if a donor's traveling, she gets per diem, she gets mileage. Yes. If she's leaving her kids for a week, she can get childcare, she can get pet care. These are the little things that get negotiated in the contract, right?
These are things that are part of a standard commercial arrangement as well, even though this is not a commercial contract. If you are working and you are unable to work remotely these days, if you're unable to work remotely and you're giving up wages as a result of a traveling donation, it would make sense to be reimbursed for what you're giving up. That's the lost wage component that goes into certain contracts. Not a lot, but there's still some that have that. So those things are negotiated. There are caps. We are able to keep a handle on expenses. The per diem rate is fixed. The travel arrangements are done in a certain way so that it's considered sort of like what you would do with a normal business trip. And everybody knows that ahead of time. So those are the terms that are sort of the fact pattern of any particular arrangement.
Okay.